We'll be taking a look today at two examples of how math teachers who are currently working at both Stowe Middle School and the Moyle Union Middle School are changing their practice so that they can increase student agency in the classroom. And they're doing so by thinking about personalization and proficiencies. We'll take a look at the slides they were able to share with us at Dynamic Landscapes in this year in May. They were kind enough to both say that they would share their stories when I asked them this question. I was curious about how students can take charge of their learning in a personalized and proficiency-based context. And since both of them were experimenting with that very thing, they were willing to come and share their experiences. So I'm going to go through some of the slides that they shared with us with that focus on personalization and student agency in the classroom. We define personalization by looking at the Brea-McClaskey definition, and I want to point your attention to this idea of number 2, where there's active participation in the design of their learning and thinking about who's responsible and making things very clear for the students about where they're going, giving them lots of choices in terms of pace and path for them, can sort of shift the dynamic in the classroom. In competency-based, which is similar to proficiency-based education, this agency often comes when teachers can demystify both the skills development and the assessment process in the classroom. Again, making that very transparent, giving students increasing responsibility and voice in making choices. And so let's look at how these two different teachers in middle school math classrooms approach this. Paige Emery from Stowe Middle School, her answer is partner pacing through being really clear about progressions with proficiency. She, like most of us in our own classrooms, deals with a range of abilities, the range of motivations. The access to resources in and outside of the classroom can be different for students, and knowing that personalization is the way to go. So the way that she set up her partner pacing program is that she strategically pairs students when she has good access to some of the data about where they are in terms of their ability ranges. And we'll show you in just a second about how she does this. She's very transparent with learning scales. And so she has a learning scale both for work habits and expectation for this student agency, as well as some of the Common Core math standards she's been working on. She uses lots of technology tools and is really clear with lots of digital resources when she's tracking vocabulary practice, using videos in order to get there. And then some of the resources she already had in her Smartboard notebook. Here's a look at the scale that all the students are working toward in terms of work habits. And you'll notice it's the real intentional push for students to ask for feedback or to clarify, take ownership so that they know and they're the ones who can assess their own learning. Here's an example of one of her courses through Schoology, and you'll see each one of those lessons are there where Paige has taken multiple learning activities and put them in each one of these assignments. So what students end up doing is when they open one of the assignments, there are 2 or 3 activities that are full class activities. Everyone comes together to go ahead and work through those. And then there are 7, 8, or 9 other learning opportunities where kids can make a choice about where they are as they pace through working on a specific targeted proficiency. Here's an example in Schoology of one of the quizzes or exit tickets that was put together at the end of each one of these lessons. And you'll notice at the bottom here, there's a clear alignment because Schoology allows you to do that to anything, whether it's an assessment, assignment, a quiz, a discussion, so that there can be some, that transparency of what kids are working toward, but also a way to get some data back about where kids are in this process for kids to see that data as well. Here you can see a view from Paige's mastery tracking feature in Schoology. You'll notice at the top there, the results of this are organized by the target proficiency. And you can see that students, where they happen to be pretty much on a continuum, each one of these little cells for the student lets you know where the student happens to be. And the little number in the upper right-hand corner of each one of the cells lets you know how many learning activities or assessments are aligned to that standard in that way. This view for Paige allows her to organize the students in their peer pacing groups so that they can help each other as they move forward, and gives her a chance to be able to target remediation or to push kids forward in terms of challenges. You'll notice too that one of the things that I think is really powerful in terms of visual graphic data like this is students, when they're in Schoology, get to click on their own mastery button. Then they get their own feedback, again aligned to the learning targets that Paige has made clear. And each one of the bars, or the green bars, gives the students feedback about which assignment or assessment they did that was aligned to that standard itself. So a student, again, would come in and be able to click on his or her mastery tracking and see this and start to make plans. So we know that if everything seems to be fine in certain standards, but then there's a score that lets them know that they might, and color coding in red, that they need to move forward by making some extra efforts or getting extra help or working with their partners to progress. I'm going to shift into Ryan Farron because he, in his math class, is doing something pretty similar to Paige, but then he expanded it out after his first experiment with aligning with proficiencies this way to ask kids to co-construct problems with him. So we'll get to that. But here's a visual for Ryan where he as well uses Schoology and some other tools to be really clear about what proficiencies and standards they're working toward. He uses Blend Space, and so in Blend Space, he has a series of exercises, activities, and then finally a quiz, so students can work at their own pace and challenge themselves in the way that makes the most sense for them via this tool. As well, he uses Dreambox, which is another online tool that gives him lots of feedback about student progressions around targeted proficiencies, but does it in a game-based way with lots of incentives built in for kids in terms of play. And BuzzMath as well. So he uses a multiple range of tools in order for skills assessment to be worked on. And then the expectation on his team is that students self-assess around these proficiencies by creating Google Slides to show evidence around each one. Those are shared with the teachers, and also students put those on their PLPs, and when they do student-led conferences, they share this evidence around these proficiencies with their parents. Brian was using a old-fashioned tracking system. The students were interested in their progression and were happy with this chart up on the wall so that they could continue to show movement toward meeting their goals. And he's also now starting to experiment with, like Paige, the mastery tracking in Schoology so that students have another visual graphic representation of their growth. Pros and cons. Again, one of the concerns that Ryan shared was that he had really sort of been intentional these last 2 years around this skills development, but he was concerned that kids weren't having lots of practice or lots of voice in problem solving and other kinds of mathematical thinking and projects. So in addition to continuing with a proficiencies-based skills, self-paced pathway through those with all of those technology tools, he started working with kids to think about problems and that they would develop their own problems based on a wonder or a notice of something. So this is an example of how he was speaking to kids who are in rural Vermont wondering why there aren't very many taxis in Vermont. And after having some conversations about that and working on a Google Doc where they tried to figure out, well, some of the notices and some of the wonderings, they each came up with a problem. And then within that problem to solve, they decided to add math components and then tried to solve the problem themselves and then share with other classes so other classes could try to solve the problems as well. The two examples here pushed my thinking both in blended learning opportunities with using technology tools, but also what does it look like with conversations with students? What happens when you can open up space to do co-constructing problems or doing a lot more targeted work as an instructor in the classroom when you give a chance for students to have a better sense of what they're working toward, tools to do so at their own pace, and a chance to have a voice in that process. So I challenge you, how can you help students in your own classroom take charge of their day-to-day learning? Thanks for listening.